Oi, pessoal. Então, estamos aqui mais uma vez, segundo dia do CONAREC, agora com Michael Solomon, um dos maiores especialistas, se não o maior especialista mundial em comportamento do consumidor. Ele fez uma palestra muito inspiradora e muito interessante aqui no nosso evento hoje. Depois participou de um painel, e o que nós vamos fazer agora é falar um pouco justamente sobre o seu novo livro, né, derrubando os clichês do marketing e como que as empresas podem reagir e propor novas formas de atender, entender, compreender e se engajar com o pós-consumidor. Hi, Michael. It's a pleasure to have you here. It's an honor for us to have you here in Brazil. So, what is your impressions of this visit? You had been in our country in a couple of times, but what's your impressions about our country right now?
Well, I've seen tremendous growth. Everything is so much more sophisticated now than when I was here before. And I think certainly the scale of this particular conference is very, very impressive. Just the amount of sponsors, all of the physical design that went into this is definitely as good or better than anything I've seen at home. So,
well, thank you. So let's talk about your book. And you wrote about how companies need or must or should tear down the walls in order to engage with their consumers in a better way, even if we consider the rise of the post-consumer right now. So what kind of walls we need to tear down right now?
We have been educated to believe that there are basic categories that we use to think about people, and our brains are very comfortable putting people into categories and assigning them labels and thinking that we understand them because we've given them a label. So those labels can be, for example, in market segmentation, we can talk about is our audience young or old, or rich or poor, male or female, and so on. And so we like to think that we have this very generic consumer who is 28 years old, female, lives in Sao Paulo, what have you. But the reality is that today those very basic categories really don't exist anymore. In what we call the postmodern era of consumer behavior, individuals are climbing out of those categories. They don't want to be labeled. They don't want to feel that they're like many, many thousands of other people. And because of the huge changes in both culture and technology that we've seen in the last 10 or 20 years, in fact, it is possible today to truly talk about markets of one. And so each of us...
It's the same point that Mr. Joe Pine highlighted yesterday.
Yes, I think it's very similar, and it really reflects, I think, a way of thinking that a lot of people are coming on to, and we've seen this especially in terms of personalizing advertising messages online. But it goes way beyond that, because what it means is that we as consumers are no longer allowing companies to dictate who we are. It doesn't mean that we don't like companies, and it doesn't mean that we don't like brands, but we use the brands much more proactively, much more on our own terms. So each of us is like an artist that has a palette of paints to paint a picture of who we are. Those paints are the brands, but each of us combines those brands in very unique ways.
In different moments. So what you said is the companies are addicted to look to the trees and not to the forest, in order to realize how these changes are affecting their business.
Oh, that's absolutely true. And one tangible example of that I think almost every company overlooks, there are a few exceptions. When you talk about the forest versus the trees, your tree is your industry category. But the reality is that the consumer is actually buying the forest. So for example, if you sell lamps, you're trying to sell me a lamp. But I, as the consumer, I'm buying a living room. And so I'm buying your lamp, but I'm also buying carpeting and, everything else that goes in that living room. So you're missing out on a lot of opportunities because you're staying within your own category. And you could be doing a lot more either by expanding your product portfolio to other categories or perhaps co-branding with companies that you have no relationship with right now. But taken together, they complement each other because from the consumer's perspective, they all go together. So I think that forest versus the trees metaphor is really appropriate in a lot of ways and strategically is something that 95% of companies don't seem to understand.
Why is it so hard to the companies to break this kind of mindset? Okay, it's a question of time because the evolve of the companies during the capitalism era built this way of thinking. But why is it so hard? Because we have the information, we have your insights, and why is it so hard to break these rules in order to create another perspective? To reshape our business in this way?
Well, the short answer, I'll answer in one word: quarters. And what I mean by that is that everyone is thinking about the next quarter and short-term results. And I understand that there's a lot of pressure to show those results. But the kind of big changes that we're talking about here will not happen in a quarter. So it's only the companies that are in it for the long term that have the luxury to be able to make these changes, because these changes are disruptions that in the short term will cause problems. They will definitely cause problems. So, for example, one of the walls that I talk about in my book is buying versus renting. And another is the producer versus the consumer. Now, both of those together are creating a lot of disruptions because what it means is that everyday people are buying and selling and renting products to other everyday people. So what does that mean? It means a lot of people who are in the business of selling those products are going to be losing their jobs. And technology is causing a lot of that. So we have, for example, self-driving cars. Everybody thinks that's a wonderful thing, and I believe that it's a wonderful thing. But it also means we have a generation of truck drivers who are probably not going to be employed in the next 5 years. So every move that we make in the long term is going to have short-term costs.